David, you're not a wrestler!
These videos are satiric reviews. You don't have to agree, but don't bitch about it.
I got one thing to say to you. I was the heavyweight champion of the world!
Hey there, I'm Social Injustice Warrior V Infuso. And you remember David Arquette? You know, that dude from Scream, as most people know him. Well, he was a bit of a hot commodity back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Some of that might have came from the fact that he was married to Courtney Cox at the time, who was Monica from Friends. That was kind of a big deal. But somehow, someway, WCW managed to snag him for their abysmal Ready to Rumble movie, which, by the way, totally isn't a guilty pleasure cult classic for me whatsoever. Because I say this without guilt. I love that movie. Fight me. Arquette starred alongside Oliver Platt in the WCW roster at the time, though there is a shocking lack of Kevin Nash in this film. The movie was seen as a failure, so in a mangled attempt to generate interest in the film, they decided to incorporate the actor into WCW storylines, teaming him with his Ready to Rumble co-star DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, who was also then the WCW champion. On his friend's behalf, he'd get into a confrontation with WCW bigwig Eric Bischoff, and would actually go on to defeat him in a match on Nitro. And this might have been the only time no one complained about a part-timer beating a full-time guy. What fans would complain about came the following episode of Thunder, the B show of the B brand. After a beatdown, Arquette would team with Page in a tag team match for the world title. And no, you didn't mishear me. A tag team match for a singles belt.
So Joe Della, at Collateral Damage, when we go a one-on-one for these tag team titles, know this.
The stipulation was that whoever got the pinfall would become world champion. To the shock of every wrestling fan in attendance and watching at home, David Arquette would get the pinfall, making him the WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Gonna put some butts in the seat.
That's right. David Arquette, an actor, had somehow, through Carney virtue, won a world championship. Of course, years later, WWE would go on to do the same exact thing, albeit with slightly different success. Very slightly. It was a move made to get more eyes focused on the product, and the movie they'd invested so much in. Instead, this earned them the ridicule of every WCW detractor and fan alike. Now, while everyone looks back at David's run in the company not so fondly, and rightfully so, the belt shouldn't have been as devalued as they'd made it. But to be fair, Vince Russo would also win that same belt just a few months later, so who knows, maybe that ship already sailed. Regardless of his status as world champion, his presence on WCW TV wasn't at all awful, aside from one promo that we will get to later. He was used mainly as comic relief, and in his own way, he actually was kind of funny. I don't think wrestling audiences exactly hated David, but they sure as hell weren't happy that he was their world champion. At least his time with the company gave us Courtney Cox and Kurt Russell acknowledging WCW. I mean, that makes it all worth it, right? No, it doesn't. Arquette would defend his title against Tank Abbott with help from best bud DDP. And though a black mark on WCW, David would only hold the title for 12 whole days before Slamboree, in which he defended the title against Jeff Jarrett, the company's up-and-coming big bad, and good guy DDP, in the same match that was featured in Ready to Rumble, the Triple Cage. And say what you will about those matches, but I personally miss them. I mean, the structure's set up for so many possibilities, but, that's probably a video for another day. Arquette would turn on Page for no reason whatsoever, turning heel in the process. He'd align himself with his tormentors, Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff, joining their New Blood stable. Until DDP hit him with a diamond cutter, putting him out of commission. He would, however, months later return to help out his buddy Chris Kanyon in a match against Buff Bagwell. While he didn't make for a good champion, he did at least play his part well. This is one of the rare cases where I blame the art and not the artist here. It should be noted that David's an avid wrestling fan and was immediately against the booking, only agreeing to work the angle when the company insisted, practically begging him to go through with it. The whole thing came across as little more than a failed publicity stunt, which it was, and it only further tarnished the company's credibility. But to Arquette's credit, all of his WCW paychecks were donated to the families of the deceased Brian Pillman and Owen Hart, as well as the quadriplegic Droz. Arquette would later make a few appearances in the crowd at WWE events, eventually actually competing in a match. He'd play up his time in WCW as their champion and go back to his cheesy heel persona, teaming with the Miz's right-hand man, Alex Riley, in a losing effort to Randy Orton back in 2010. He would later collab with Chris Jericho for a duet that nobody asked for, but nobody's going to complain about. I mean, those men have the voices of angels.
A little bit terrified, and then I see the look in your eyes. Round, bright eyes. Every now and then I fall apart.
Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that one time he showed up just to shit on Brock Lesnar.
Is he going to show up?
Brock Lesnar?
Oh, he is?
I mean, I think so.
He is good. Oh, that's exciting.
Good times. 8 years later, Arquette would appear on the Wendy Williams show, claiming that he wanted wrestling fans to respect him, and that he was training for a big return.
For 18 years, I've been trolled on the internet, and people have attacked me, and I just want to bring some respect back to my name.
He began competing in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. No, seriously, that's the name of the company. Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, where he'd lose his debut match in typical Arquette fashion. However, following the loss, he'd begin teaming with the man who handed him that loss, RJ City, and has even since appeared on an Impact Wrestling taping.
2 masks from the aforementioned movie and series Scream in that movie. And they're taunting Arquette with the Scream masks. Dive to the outside. Arquette wants to be a wrestler, and there's a dive!
And in most recent news of me making this video, which I'm sure he's fully recovered now, he actually suffered a severe neck injury during a death match, in which a piece of glass was jammed into his neck. Suffice it to say, he had to be hospitalized and operated on. The only thing worse than the severity of this injury is the additional insult the media slapped on it, noting this happened in a fake wrestling match. And David, what are your thoughts on that?
Wrestling's not fake!
Very well spoken. Should be calling him David Articulate. Forget I said that. I don't mean to sound like Marky Mark. I get that these things are scripted, and I'm not one to toss around the F word, but I also typically don't take offense to it either. But the guy lacerated his neck. Do you really need to add fake in there? If he'd gotten injured on the set of a movie, would the headline read, David Arquette injured shooting fake movie? It's all entertainment. Except in this line of entertainment, you do more work than the people in the other line of entertainment, but get less respect for it. I think most people recognize wrestling is scripted. It's a scripted event. And to some degree, a lot of people can claim that wrestlers are really actors. However, they're also their own stuntman, so maybe shut the fuck up with the whole fake thing, right? No? Maybe? Though David's been one of wrestling's biggest botched failed experiments, his dedication to the craft, love of the industry, and his good-willed nature about his run is what I think should be remembered most. He's improved tremendously, and should he continue to pursue life in the ring, I'm sure that he'll continue to make improvements. Regardless of how you feel about his WCW run, you have to admit, he's got some balls doing what he's doing. I mean, his on-screen pal DDP was 35 when he began getting trained to wrestle, and back then, it was thought that he was too old to be in the business. In contrast, David Arquette only officially got trained at 47 years old. And in terms of the wrestling community, I would actually say that he's more relevant now than he was when he was world champ. I want to make it clear, David is still very green, but he's agile for someone who's pushing 50. While his performances aren't at a point where you couldn't tell him from the rest of a roster, he does have the proper drive and dedication, and with time, I think that'll come. And I think that David Arquette may just be another case of a boyhood dream come true. For all his contributions to the world of wrestling, I wouldn't be surprised to one day see him honored in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah, former world champion, one of the legends of the pro wrestling game!
So with that being said, I'm the social injustice warrior V Infuso, and if you like the words that came out of my mouth hole and you too want to become a VTard, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this video came from. Follow me on Twitter because, hell, why not? It's not considered stalking if it's on the internet, am I right? And don't forget to join the Discord. I don't have anything catchy to add to that, but just join it. Just go do it. And if you have a free moment of time and a free $1 to spare, then head over to my Patreon, where for just $1, you too could help keep this boat afloat. And if you don't have that $1, but you do have a free moment of time, then hit the share button. It will help me out tremendously.
VTart. Oh.